I find ventilation to be one of the most difficult topics that we teach for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is that the experts don't agree on the number of CFM cubic feet per minute that you need to bring into a home, especially on the whole house side of ventilation, whole building ventilation. Also, it just seems like ventilation is one of those areas where the likelihood of unintended consequences is fairly high. And it's also that ventilation is a fairly weak solution for keeping a home or a building dry. And then there's the part that how much, how many CFM do we really need to make the air fresh for breathing? And there's no real good scientific evidence that we can point to that gives us very good guidance. So that's why I find ventilation, a difficult topic to deal with, but nevertheless, we have to deal with it. So let's look at some decisions about ventilation and see if we can get some logic to, making decisions about ventilation. The first question is, and this can make the whole thing pretty easy for us because what are the requirements? I mean, if you are participating in an energy conservation program or if your building department says that you follow a certain ventilation standard, then hey, follow it. And that will tell you what to do. And but at the same time, you want to ask the question, what are we trying to accomplish? And there's two things we're normally trying to accomplish. First of all, we want to keep the building dry because if it's wet, microorganisms and pests grow and the particles of their bodies get airborne and they cause asthma and allergies. So it's very easy to make that as one of our goals. Then, of course, there's fresh air, and that's basically what we're doing whole building ventilation for. And so what are we trying to accomplish? I mean, if the ground is wet all the way around the building, or there's standing water in the crawl space, or there's a lot of chemicals installed in the building, well, that's not really a job for ventilation. I mean, using ventilation to try to dry out the ground around your house would be like trying to dry out the ground around your house with a leaf blower or something like that. It's just not going to work very well. We need drainage, we need rain gutters, downspouts, moisture solutions that can deal with a lot of water. And ventilation can't deal with a lot of water. So let's control or isolate these sources of moisture and sources of air pollution. Got to get them out of the building. And then we come to a split decision between spot ventilation and whole house ventilation. With spot ventilation, it's a pretty easy decision. Hey, if you don't have a range hood in your kitchen, well, you need one. We really believe in range hoods, and we believe in nice big 6, 7, 8-inch ducts going straight up through the roof or through the gable and getting that cooking odors out of the kitchen. So, and also in bathrooms. We're thinking that 50 CFM per bathroom is what is called for by a lot of different standards. I think it's a good standard. I don't have any problem with it at all. You might not need 50, but it's a good number and a good number to start with. So spot ventilation, hey, it's an easy decision. Let's just do it. Whole building ventilation is a little bit different. Okay, let's install the spot ventilation. Let's just say, hey, that we've discussed that enough. We're going to install the spot ventilation, but then we're going to measure the air tightness of the building. I just don't see how we can make any decisions about ventilation without measuring air leakage. So if it's an existing home, and let's say we've got something like 7, 8, 9 air changes an hour at 50 pascals, maybe we just don't need a whole building ventilation system. If we're looking at a new building and the new building maybe has 1 air change per hour at 50 pascals, then we're going to need a central ventilation system, a very well-designed ventilation system. Might as well install a heat recovery ventilator, energy recovery ventilator with that system. So the air tightness is going to give us a clue about what we need to do, what our strategy is going to be. And then we have to choose a whole house ventilation strategy and a whole house ventilation system. We could have an exhaust only ventilation system using an exhaust fan. We can have a supply only ventilation system using an intake duct with a damper, or we can have a fully ducted balanced ventilation system. And so we're going to have to decide on a strategy. Then we're going to have to determine the whole house, whole building airflow rate. And we'll talk about that in a minute on how to do that. And then we'll have to size the exhaust fan or the ventilator, the ductwork, to get us the airflow rate that we determined. And then we want to observe installation best practices, and we want to make sure that it's installed properly, and we want to commission it. And that includes measuring the airflow rate, because then we'll figure out how optimistic we were, which is why I say be pessimistic. Maybe use one size larger of a duct than you think you need, and you might get the airflow that is your target airflow. Okay, let's talk about how to find the whole building airflow rate. And this is a sensitive issue because there's a lot of disagreement on how to do this. There's a number of different standards. And okay, let's look at this table and try to understand it. Here's our floor area in square feet: 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000, 3,500. And our occupants: 3 occupants, 4 occupants, 5 occupants, 6 occupants, 7 occupants. And this is just, a really general example of some different home sizes and what we would find as a recommended airflow rate given a number of different common rules of thumb and standards. And so we have 2 ASHRAE standards here, one that was released in 2010, 62.2/2010, and one that's 62.2/2013. And they're very different. And there was a lot of argument, and there's been a lot of disagreement between these 2 standards because they are very different. The ASHRAE 2013 standard requires more ventilation, much more ventilation than the 2010 standard. Now, the standard that preceded them, which was enforced for a long time, and it was more like a rule of thumb, said that you had to have 0.35 natural air changes per hour, and that could be supplied by either air leakage or a ventilation system or a combination of both. And also there's another part of that standard. Actually, the standard said that you could size the ventilation system by 0.35 air changes an hour, but not less than 15 CFM per person. So, and there's a lot of architects and engineers and ventilation designers that still walk around and say, geez, this building was designed for 100 people. 100 times 15 is 1,500. So I would have to supply about 1,500 CFM. Or, if you're talking about a house, you're assuming that there are 2 occupants of the master bedroom and then 1 occupant for each additional bedroom. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you're going to estimate that there's 4 occupants. 4 times 15 would be 60. So I did this table to kind of show you what the airflow would be, given these different ways of figuring it out. So this is 0.35 air changes an hour. That really gives us, in these particular examples, it gives us the lowest number, 0.35 air changes per hour. And of course, we'd absolutely have to have a blower door test to figure out, what this number actually was. And really, what we're saying is we need a blower door test anyways, because we have to know, how to design our system. Then 15 CFM per person, we're just taking the number of occupants, taking it times 15. You can see here that it just increases as it goes down because of the number of occupants right here. Then we have ASHRAE 6222-2010, which has a formula. And you take the number of occupants times 7.5, and then you add 1% of the conditioned floor area. And with ASHRAE 62-2013, they raised that to, instead of 1% of the floor area, it's 3% of the floor area. So you see that between here and here, we have a very large difference between these two. And, the committee, the ASHRAE committee, thought that the method that they provided was being, somehow misused by the public or by, people, and so that they needed to create a more complicated standard, and a standard that, required more whole house ventilation airflow. So I took, and added all these up per row and averaged them just for the heck of it. Now, that I'm not saying that's not very scientific, okay? And, pardon me if it offends anyone, but okay, we have an average over here. And I want you to look at the average of all these standards and compare it to this 15 CFM per person here. And, it's really close. And so I don't know that, saying 15 CFM per person, isn't a pretty good estimate of what you might want if you were to average the opinions of the expert, as expressed by this old legacy standard combined with these 2 newer standards. 15 CFM per person is a pretty good estimate of that. And given the fact that we don't really know how much airflow we need to keep the air acceptably clean, we can't even define what acceptably clean is. We got to go back to the question of what are we trying to accomplish here? And, if we're in a leaky building, then we're probably not going to accomplish anything by putting in a whole building ventilation system. The spot ventilation is still a good idea, but the whole building ventilation system, the interference by the air leakage might be so great that the whole building ventilation system just simply doesn't make much of a difference one way or the other. The other problem is that a lot of exhaust-only ventilation systems are being sized using one of these standards. The question there is is an exhaust-only ventilation system where the air coming into the building is not filtered and may be coming from, say, a floor drain in the basement, or God forbid, an open plumbing trap, or from the attic, or from the attached garage, or someplace like that. Is there, what is the likelihood that an exhaust-only ventilation system is going to take the existing air and make it cleaner by bringing in air from wherever it brings in air from the outdoors and from a number of other possible areas? That's a question that I'm asking, and I don't really have an answer for the question, except that I think in certain cases, I don't know how many or what percentage, that the exhaust-only ventilation system does not make the air cleaner. Like, I'm giving you my understanding, and my understanding does contain some opinion, so you're going to have your own opinion after you look at what we have to say and what others have to say. Okay, now let's talk about, given that we've got some kind of a number now for airflow, how do we get that airflow? Well, we're looking at here at a table, and we have the desired CFM on top: 25 CFM, 50, 75, 100, 150, 200. Then we have two types of ducts. We have rigid round duct and flex duct. And the flex duct has more resistance to it. I mean, a 4-inch flex duct has more resistance than a 4-inch smooth metal duct. So if we want 25 CFM, let's say that we had no bathroom fan, but we had a window in the bathroom, which often counts as about 20 CFM. And we figure we could, put a 25 CFM fan in there to get close enough to 50. Well, we need a 4-inch rigid duct or a 5-inch flex duct, along with, making sure we weren't using any more than 2 90-degree bends, and and installing it properly, orienting the fan's outlet toward the termination fitting. So with 50 CFM, we want to vent a bathroom. We're going to have a 5-inch duct or a 6-inch duct. I would recommend a 6-inch rigid duct, actually, to make sure you're going to get, your 50. If you've got a lot of occupancy, you got 4 kids, a couple adults, something like that, using one bathroom, well, I think you need at least 50. So use 6 inches. There's a lot of fans that are installed where they're only getting 10, 15, 20 CFM when they're supposed to be getting a lot more than that. So I want to make sure that we're using large enough ducts. Okay, let's go up to 150. Let's say you're living in a big home and you were going to use an exhaust fan or a ventilator. You had a heat recovery ventilator or something like that. Well, you'd want the ability to move, say, 150 CFM, which would be an 8-inch smooth duct or a 9-inch flex duct. The thing you have to remember is, well, if you do your commissioning and you take a measurement and you've got way more ventilation you need, you can always time it on and off. And that's a really good option. So determine your airflow rate and then make a choice on what type of system that you're going to have, and then decide what kind of duct sizing you have, and then follow the best practices for installation, and you should get yourself a very satisfactory ventilation system.